Welcome to Section 1904. It is Wednesday. Padres are playing a day game. We have a couple minutes we could talk about the Padres from Tuesday night, taking the first couple of games against the New York Mets. We also had Leagues Cup action at Snapdragon Stadium, SDFC. Fought hard all the way until the end, but ends up losing its inaugural match in Leagues Cup play against Pachuca. So 3-2, I think the final score there. Some things that we can chat about. Today's podcast, though, just to let everybody know, it's going to be for some people. It might not be for everybody, and that's fine by us. Because one of the things I think that I wanted to do specifically in a post-radio career was have the freedom and flexibility, to have much longer conversations. Always used to get in trouble when I was working in radio because the conversations that I liked having were a little bit longer. They want you to be quick, in, out. It's all about 15 minutes, get in and out, 5-minute conversations. And I like doing longer form interviews. And today we do have an interview lined up for you. He is an investigative reporter. His name is Karim Zidan. He runs a site on Substack called Sports Politica. And that is exactly what it is, sports and politics. So the two things that we have been lectured over and over and over again that we're not supposed to mix, sports and politics, we're going to do that today. That is what the show is going to be about. We're going to talk a lot about some of the things that are happening here in the United States and that are happening abroad. And there's nobody that I've come across better to discuss this than Karim. So he will join us in a bit. You can check out his Substack, Sports Politica. You can sign up. You can get a free subscription or a trial subscription. I'm a subscriber, which is how I came across some of the content there. And I know I shared it with John. I've shared it with a couple of other people. I do appreciate the work that goes into it. I don't think it's easy. And, I also think that he does it about as well as anybody. But we are also, as we're recording here, we have no updates on the trade deadline whatsoever. So I don't know what there is really to get into other than Yu Darvish will be pitching this afternoon. I don't know that any trades are dependent on the quality of this performance for Yu Darvish. Was told earlier this week, I think I mentioned it on Monday, that it feels like it's going to go up until the deadline. So I would expect or suspect that maybe a trade is coming at some point tonight. That would be my best guess tonight, or how was it phrased to me? A lot of these teams are, what's another day? They're in what's another day mode. So just this limbo right before the deadline at 3:00. So, that I think is where it's all heading here, but good for the Padres. They win 7-1 at Petco Park. They've taken the first two against the Mets. They did it, I don't want to say unconventionally, but, we didn't really even know who the starting pitcher was going to be when we went to bed on Monday night. And so they'll go for the sweep on Wednesday. Well, we can spend some time on that on Thursday. But John, all in all, a lot of people went to sporting events, on multiple sporting events on Tuesday nights. That was a cool thing.
Yeah, good night for San Diego sports. I had both TVs going at one point. I was kind of walking back and forth between the two of them, trying to follow both. Definitely followed the Padres game closer than I followed SDFC, but we can get into SDFC because I have thoughts there. But notably, no pitching performance from Robert Suarez. They didn't need him. And I don't think Gavin Sheets was in the lineup, unless I'm mistaken. I think Iglesias got the start at third and Manny was playing DH, unless I have that wrong. So the two guys I kind of criticized for wearing down yesterday get a day of rest. Good for them. 7-1. How often do we complain about, the Padres not scoring more than a couple runs and not giving their bullpen a rest with a big win? And here they are. They did it. I saw after the game, someone on Twitter posted, four losses in a row to freak you out, and then 4 wins in a row right before the trade deadline to give you hope. And that's exactly what the Padres are right now. They're filled with hope. Feels real good. They've already won the series against the Mets. Cardinals coming in on Friday. They have an off day tomorrow for the trade deadline. So we'll see if anything happens. I dug through the Buster Only, Jeff Passan, ESPN, here's our roundup of every baseball rumor going around right now thing this morning. And here's what they had to say about the Padres. Marcell Ozuna needs to go somewhere. Maybe it's the Padres. There's a bunch of teams interested in a starting pitcher. Maybe they'll trade for Dylan Cease. The only other person, and I think Ozuna, we've kind of said there's probably no interest there. I guess it depends on price maybe. The only other person I saw that they were this person could maybe potentially go to the Padres was, is it Charlie Morton from the Orioles? which sure, I guess. But it seemed like there was, once again, a lot of focus on Padres can't really add money, so they're going to get rid of Cease and see if maybe they can take some of whatever they get from Cease and turn it into I don't know, left fielder or catcher or another arm or whatever. I don't know. I'm starting to get real. We tried everything and nothing really came together, but we're really confident in our team anyway because, we got back Michael King and Darvish is going to get straightened out and we think Cease is really close and look at the offense. I'm starting to get those types of vibes. So hopefully I'm wrong.
Well, we're also talking about a 59-49 team that's 4 games back of the Dodgers. So, is there any argument to be made that scored 23, is it? 20, I don't know the math. 23 or so runs over the last 4 games. I get it. That's 4 games. Their offense still is somewhat the runs scored 25th and on base percentage 17th, slugging percentage 25th. So, is there room for improvements? Yeah, absolutely. But, I think you also now or at least you have to factor in a little bit of the vibes. Now, the vibes thing is tricky because you always say something like, well, what if Jake Cronenworth's a big piece of the puzzle inside of the clubhouse? And he might be. But if you bring in somebody who's better, they'll get over that real quick.
Right.
It's the one thing about players. They'll be like, oh, man, I can't believe this. Like, Jake's our dude. Jake's our guy. Jake sets up golf on the road or whatever he does.
Right.
But the second they bring in somebody who's better, they'll be like, yeah, well, it was nice knowing you, Jake. Like, we're going to move on. Just the way players kind of are.
Winning
but I do think
vibes.
There's at least something to be considered in terms of the vibes, that you look and you're 10 games over and you've scored a bunch of runs. And Manny's saying, we just keep playing baseball. We just keep playing baseball. We just keep playing baseball. Just keep playing our game. Just keep playing. And there is something to that, you look and you go, I don't know. Do we really want to take a big piece of this away and run the risk of having people mope around a little bit if it's just going to be considered marginable or for financial reasons? And I do think those are the kind of things that you have to factor in. So We'll see. We'll see if nobody has yet asked Manny Machado why it is that he disabled his Instagram account. Oh. And I've been in the ears of our local reporters. I'm not going to mention who, but I've been in the ears of our local reporters saying, when are one of you people going to ask this question, please? And nobody has done it as of yet, although at least one has promised that they will. Another one said that they are not allowed. So it's out there. It is out there. Again, that's one of those, I don't know that you want to mess with the vibes, but if you've had Manny Machado endorse a post from Scott Kaplan suggesting that this organization is too cheap to add anybody at the deadline, well, I'm not sure what you're supposed to do with that if you work for this club.
Yeah. Hopefully someone follows your instructions and asks them about it. I'd be interested to see how it goes. But yeah, one of the things that has really bothered me about this team for years, but especially in 2023, was this team always seems to have one guy who catches fire offensively and everyone else is struggling. And then it switches to a different guy. And right now it seems like everyone is hitting. Xander Bogaerts is hitting. Manny has remained hot. Diaz has been hitting the last couple of days. Jackson Merrill has been hitting for the last 10 or 15 games. Fernando Tatis, even without the power, as I talked about yesterday, is hitting consistently, getting on base all the time. Luis Arraez hitting consistently, getting on base, hit a home run the other night. 6 or 7 guys in their lineup right now are hitting almost as well as they've hit all year long. That's going to make the vibes better because that's going to lead to runs. That's going to lead to winning. That's going to lead to comeback wins, walk-off wins. And all that stuff improves the vibes.
All right. Well, if you are a subscriber to Section 1904, you got your fix today. John's got you covered with all the things that you might have missed if you were at Snapdragon Stadium or Petco Park last night. He delivers it to you. It's called the Front Row Seat. Each and every day for as low as $5 per month, you could be a subscriber. I had people in the press box last night at Snapdragon Stadium telling me how much they're enjoying the work that we're doing.
Hell yeah.
They're impressed by the consistency with which we put out content. And coming up, this is, as said, this is an interview that John and I have wanted to do for a while. And Karim Zidan agreed to do the show a couple of weeks back, right before my father passed away. And so we had to put it on hold. And I know some of this will have been more topical about the Club World Cup and Gianni Infantino, the head of FIFA, and his relationship with Donald Trump. Some of this would have been a little more topical a couple of weeks ago, but it is still very, very topical. The Substack is Sports Politica, and our conversation, here it is with Karim Zidan. All right. Well, as said, become a fan of the Substack. Sports Politica, and he is responsible for it. He's an investigative journalist. It is his Substack. He's Karim Zidan joining us here on Section 1904. Karim, thank you very much for doing this. Appreciate it. I appreciate the work on the Substack.
Oh, thank you so much, Darren. It's a pleasure being on the show.
Well, tell us a little bit before we get rolling. What is Sports Politica?
So Sports Politica is really my media platform that delves specifically into my niche, which is the intersection of sports, power, and politics. There isn't really an outlet out there specifically dedicated to this type of intersection. Even though, and I'll say this, I used to get laughed out of the building when I tell people about 10 years ago that I'd write about sports and politics. They're like, what? Really? Just stick to sports. Why can't you just do the job of a sports reporter? Or if you love politics that much, why don't you go into politics? I tell them, well, listen, I'm the guy who, is far more interested in the political side of sports than the sports side of anything else. Really. So to me, it's just, this is what always made sense. And there is so much work out there to be done within this specific niche, especially now. I mean, think of everything, all the discussions we're going to talk about today. Couple that with, the rise of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Gulf, Israel and Gaza, all sorts of topics verge in that niche that I cover, which is sports and politics. So it was high time that I started an outlet that specifically was dedicated to that.
And to that point, I am not that far removed from working in sports radio in San Diego, where I loved my 20 years. And I did work for one of the big corporations for iHeart. And Karim, it probably won't be a surprise to you that I had executives and bosses who told me, don't talk about politics. They did literally do the thing that you just said, which was stick to sports, because whether it was trying to maximize your audience or trying not to tick off shareholders or run the risk of spoiling any sort of advertising opportunities, that's a real thing. That's not just something people scream at you on social media. I just wonder, like from your standpoint, I know it's hard to evaluate everybody who works in sports and their capabilities of talking about politics, but when you talk about how 10 years ago you almost got laughed out of the business for this kind of concept, it's just very real on the inside that you're instructed not to do this thing that we're going to do here today on this podcast. Is that the right choice? Is that something that you would agree with? Or is that something that you think maybe especially in these times, people should examine and think about changing a little bit?
Listen, this wasn't even just about the industry itself laughing me out of the business. It was more fans and the sports audience themselves couldn't quite understand what I was trying to do or achieve by focusing on sports. Listen, there was a point at least where I could get it. To be able to sort of, sports for many people is just sort of this opportunity for escapism. And listen, I really understand that. Life is hard as it is, and everybody wants some sort of outlet for escapism. To many people, that's sports. But it's a privilege to be able to use sports as an escapism and as a form of escapism. I say that because I come from Egypt and I was never given that privilege. All I wanted as a kid was to watch football, right? And the government kept interfering in just us wanting to watch football. And at one point, I ended up joining this little group, not particularly as an actual member. I was too young to be a member, but an ultras football group, which have been known as hooligan groups around the world. But in Egypt, this group was really just trying to find its voice to speak out against the government, saying that, hey, we need opportunities, we need life here in Egypt. And this was how young men gathered to find that voice. There was no harm being caused in that relationship, yet the police still would find us, pull people out of the stands in front of my own eyes when I was 13, 14 years old and beat them with batons. I mean, again, young teenager at the time, how am I supposed to think that, this is all just about sports? So that's always been in the back of my mind, tickling me just in the back of my mind, this idea that there's something more here. There is a veil that needs to be lifted. And then from there, really, when I started writing about mixed martial arts in around 2011, 2012, shortly thereafter, I got this opportunity to start covering to become a color commentator for a Russian mixed martial arts organization that was run by an oligarch in Putin's circle. So this changed my life dramatically. You want to talk about sort of this being nurtured through my existence in Egypt into this understanding that nothing can escape the political landscape, to growing up a little bit and ending up in Russia, where I was actually working for an oligarch in Putin's circle. So sort of this narrative continues to grow in my head, this idea that you can't really escape sports and politics, this combination of them. You'll find it everywhere if you look hard enough. And that time in Russia really cemented that for me.
Well, you don't have to look hard anymore, do you? I mean, let's fast forward to 2025, because I know when we first started chatting about having you on this show, I think we were talking about the Club World Cup. We were talking about some of the things that were popping up regarding visa applications around the world. The U.S. hosted not only the Club World Cup, the World Cup coming up next summer, the Olympics somewhere down the road. But when you talk about not being able to get away from it, you have written recently about, whether it was the first 100 days of President Trump's second term in office. He's been at a lot of these sporting events, so you can't really get away from it. You cannot compartmentalize this, I don't think, when you see him at all these different sporting events. What do you make of the role that sports is playing for this term for President Trump, which feels different than it did the first time through?
Okay, I'll start with that last statement you just made. It does feel different, doesn't it? But the truth is, and I've been doing a lot of research and a lot of writing on Trump for almost a decade now. What has always interested me is the fact that he's always had some sort of relationship to sports. He's long before he ever contemplated politics or a presidential run. This was a man who used to promote boxing, and he was promoting boxing in Atlantic City primarily because he knew it would boost his casino business. But this is somebody who ended up promoting Mike Tyson, one of the most recognizable and iconic athletes of the 20th century, right? So he's such a significant figure. And Donald Trump was right there in the center of all that, right? He hosted 2 WrestleManias, at the Taj Mahal. And that is also a big deal. He always found himself in the orbit of very interesting sports and entertainment events. And at one point, the Philadelphia Inquirer in 1988 asked him, why boxing? Why professional wrestling? And he said something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing here, isn't this so much more interesting than the opera or the ballet? And it's such a fascinating statement because, he was talking about sort of this ability to contrast and distinguish from what is considered high art to what is pure entertainment and will attract far more of the masses. And Trump understood that from then. And he utilized that even in his first presidential term, right? When he was still trying to actually, gain office for the first time, and people were still laughing and chuckling at the idea of a Donald Trump becoming president, he had UFC President Dana White speak on his behalf and endorse him at the 2016 Republican National Convention. And over the next few years, Trump sort of realized that, hey, I have this really significant fan base in the world of mixed martial arts. And the UFC, well, I've got a great relationship with their leadership. They've known me for a very long time, which is true. Trump actually hosted a UFC event or multiple UFC events in 2001. And at the time, the UFC had just gone under new ownership. That's when Dana White, Lorenzo Fertitta, etc. took over the UFC. So Dana White, who's now a major conservative star in his own right, his very first event as UFC president was an event at a Trump facility. So their relationship goes back to the early days of the Dana White-run UFC. So Trump understands this, and he understands that now he has this added platform that he can reach a younger audience. So he decides to actually utilize it. He ends up becoming the first U.S. president to attend a UFC event. Not just a sitting U.S. president, sitting, former, anything of the sort. He was the very first one to do so in 2019, right? And from there, he sort of just doubled down on this love for the UFC and understood that, hey, I can utilize these fighters. If I'm trying to present myself as a strong man, right? This is the exact image and the type of politics that Trump is trying to present. What better way to do so, to really magnify that symbolism, than to have fighters who actually punch people in the face for a living tell the world that I am a strong, powerful fighter, which is what they were doing. They would go out and not just endorse him, but campaign for him in the 2020 presidential election. A UFC fighter called Jorge Masvidal hosted a Fighters Against Socialism bus tour in 2020 for Donald Trump, where they made multiple stops around Florida, including to MMA gyms, to discuss sort of the ills of socialism and how the Democrats were actually the harbingers of socialism. It was this big sort of campaign strategy to win Latino votes. And it might not have been as effective in 2020, but eventually, come 2024, it really worked in their favor. So they were sowing the seeds for a whole new understanding of how Trump can really utilize sports and these athletes to his advantage. He wasn't the only person who's ever done it, but it's really been a masterclass over the last while. And you can really see this difference in the second term, where sure, he's making the same amount of, presidential stops as Biden before him, but the only real difference is the amount of sports events he's attending, right? He became the first sitting president to attend the Super Bowl, right, this year. He went to the Daytona 500, right? It was his second appearance there as president. The NCAA Wrestling Championships, a Live Golf, which is the Saudi bankrolled golf organization. He attended a tournament for that as well. He's attended 2 UFC events since becoming president. And of course, he was there at, the Club World Cup final. And a part of me is actually glad he's there because it was gold. That moment where he's on stage and refusing to leave the stage. I mean, every once in a while you need a chuckle, and you can trust that he'll give you that kind of chuckle.
And speaking of that, I think the Club World Cup is such an interesting thing because to your point, Karim, like we did all see Dana White campaigning 3 different times for Trump. What we have learned recently, though, is there seems to be this blossoming relationship between the head of FIFA, the global governing body of soccer around the world, FIFA World Cup, Club World Cup, Gianni Infantino is his name. There seems to be this budding relationship between the president of FIFA and the president of the United States, to the point where I don't remember if Infantino campaigned for him, but I know he was at the inauguration. Because if you knew who he was, you couldn't miss him sitting right there in the background. A lot of people in the States were focused on Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and the technocrats. But he was there. And I think a lot of people around the world went like, whoa, what is Gianni Infantino doing there? And we've seen subsequent visits to the White House. We've seen the gifts. FIFA has moved its headquarters inside of Trump Tower. And for the life of me, I understand rich and powerful people are attracted to rich and powerful people. It's the way it is. It's the way it's been. It's the way it's always going to be. But I'm just trying to figure out like what's going on with this relationship in particular when we have Infantino not only taking him there. You usually take the head of state up to the stage for people that don't follow soccer in this humorous moment in New Jersey at the Club World Cup final. It's usually the case, whether it was Qatar or Russia beforehand. So I don't know, like, what is Gianni Infantino, a really powerful person? What are they getting out of this relationship with one another, do you think?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Gianni Infantino and Trump's relationship also goes back to his first term in office. At the time, Gianni was newly president of FIFA, and FIFA had gone through a major corruption scandal, which actually resulted in the FBI raiding headquarters in Switzerland, a massive change in leadership, multiple arrests in the organization, this idea that FIFA's ethos had to change, or that the organization had to change. In comes Gianni Infantino, a supposed harbinger of change for FIFA. And at the same time, the US is going through its own makeover with Donald Trump becoming president for the first time. So these two leaders meet with a sort of understanding at the time that we are supposed to be different and to change. And I think that bonded them from the very beginning. Trump at the time and his first administration were interested in hosting a World Cup event, which would end up becoming the 2026 World Cup. But this was also at the time where Trump had initiated the Muslim ban, the original Muslim ban in 2016 or early 2017. And this was something that FIFA was not very comfortable with at the time. So what happened was that Jared Kushner, who was working, this is Donald Trump's son-in-law, was working for the administration at the time. And he was sent off to Saudi Arabia and to other places to start sort of earning their favor and winning them over, these major nations that are representative of their own regional federations, and these votes are all required for a country to secure the World Cup. So Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest influencers in the Asian Federation, for instance. So they want to secure the Asian Federation. So Jared Kushner goes and meets with Mohammed bin Salman, and they sort of agree to a quid pro quo of sorts, which was, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. You support us hosting the 2026 World Cup, and we'll support you hosting the 2030 World Cup. Originally, that's the World Cup Saudi was aiming for. They secured the 2034 World Cup, but since they named their massive grand Vision 2030, the idea was that they could hopefully secure the 2030 World Cup. Anyway, that did not happen, but they did come to this sort of agreement where Saudi would back the United States in exchange for the US eventually backing Saudi Arabia. And with more of this sort of backroom dealing, Kushner was actually able to help the US secure this World Cup. But the final sort of what helped it go across the finish line was the fact that the US was willing to share this World Cup with Canada and Mexico. This idea that this was going to be a big unifying event and there had been nothing like it before. This was very appealing to Gianni Infantino, who really wanted to do new things with FIFA at the time. He wanted to take the organization to new heights, something far beyond anything Sepp Blatter or anybody else before him had achieved. This idea of hosting a 48-team World Cup, way larger than anything we've ever seen before, across 3 countries, seemed to make sense. So eventually that's how that World Cup was secured. And really, you're watching now since then what appeared as sort of innocuous and very normal at the time, at least, securing a 2026 World Cup when there had already been a World Cup in Russia and Qatar. What you're really seeing, though, is that Gianni Infantino has continued to ingratiate himself to any authoritarian regime he can find out there. He is more than willing to make friends with anybody in the pursuit of profit at the end of the day. And that's basically how he runs FIFA. He loves to claim that none of this is ever about politics and that he's willing to work with anyone because of business. Is this sort of apathetic approach to the world that allows him to get into bed with people like this, right? To him, he sees them as powerful. But then there's also something really important that we have to realize here. The idea that mega events can take place in democracies is kind of a conflict of interest. When you think of how invasive these tournaments actually are, how much they impact, your environment, your societies, your cities themselves, the economy, none of it's positive, by the way. It might have a boost to your economy for a few days, but think of the long-term effects. Think of the long-term effects the Olympics has when you gentrify cities, kick out homeless people, you do all the different things you're going to do. You can't really do that very easily in a democracy. You can't find the budgets very easily in a democracy when you have lots of obstacles in your path and what we like to call checks and balances in your path. But when you're working with Saudi, when you're working with Qatar, when you're working with all powerful ruling families, you can do whatever you want, which is why we've seen the Olympics and FIFA sort of shift from mainly hosting events in progressive democratic cities and states to hosting and working with authoritarian regimes. Trump seems to be the perfect amalgamation of both for Infantino, where he seems to think he can achieve whatever he wants while still getting the benefit of saying that FIFA hosted the biggest World Cup in the world in the United States. So it's a fascinating relationship, but I'm personally, at this point, still surprised that he's been so willing to kiss Trump's ass to this extent. As to what he has to gain beyond the 2026 World Cup, I'm not certain.
Okay, just a quick follow-up to that, in that Trump has never shown to be a great partner to anyone who sucks up to him and makes him a partner. He'll stab them in the back the second that he disagrees with them on something. And Darren and I have both been talking about the World Cup and the Olympics in terms of how many people are going to be coming from outside the country into the country. And we saw, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, there was a Venezuelan baseball team. They were called a senior league team. That just means they're teenagers instead of kids. They were told that they were not allowed to come in because they were coming from Venezuela, which is one of the 12 countries on a list that the United States says no one can come in from that country. This is obviously going to be a problem going forward for the World Cup and the Olympics, right? Like, even if Infantino talks to Trump and Trump's like, yeah, we'll let the players and the coaches in, they're not going to let any of the fans in from Venezuela. And then how's Venezuela going to feel about that? So there is a lot more at stake here that could just blow up and turn into like a global political event as we continue to go down this road of politics and sports being intertwined, right?
I'm so glad you mentioned this, John, because honestly, yes, it's extraordinarily hypocritical when you think of the fact that FIFA's primary slogan is, football unifies the world, and you're hosting a World Cup in a place that doesn't actually want any of the fans from elsewhere to attend. I mean, you could just take it from JD Vance's mouth, right? Where he at one of the FIFA commissions that they actually set up was like, yeah, you're welcome to come in, but you must leave afterwards, right after, as soon as your visa runs. It's like, or you'll end up in jail potentially. And I think he had just like signaled to Christy Nome or something like that at that point. I'm just thinking that is really, really dark to suggest, you overstay your welcome after attending a football game. You might go straight to jail or get deported to El Salvador or who knows what else, right? It's just madness. When you think of how much the media, including myself and others, were really criticizing FIFA for hosting a World Cup in Qatar, right? Despite the fact that I'm Egyptian myself and it was the first World Cup to take place in an Arab country, it was still concerning, to say the least, right? Like, Qatar had a lot of issues at the time, including migrant worker exploitation, right? Treatment of potential minorities like LGBTQ plus people. But first of all, that event pretty much went off without a hitch. And at the same time, I'm really questioning now whether it might have ended up being a safer tournament all around than the potential one going to take place in the United States. It's shocking to even say those words out loud, but this is the current reality we occupy now, where there is far more risks for a broader range of people coming to visit the United States than potentially those trying to visit Qatar for the World Cup at the time. So that's something FIFA's going to have to deal with. And I mean, we could use the devil's advocate argument and say, well, Gianni Infantino is ingratiating himself to Trump and sort of sucking up to him to this extent because he hopes that's pretty much the only way you can talk some sense into him, maybe. If you want to ever actually get Trump to do something, well, you gotta, fawn to him and play to that ego. So potentially that's what Infantino's doing, but at the same time, this is a mess of his own making. So, you dig your grave, you sleep in it, sort of thing.
And one of the things I think that I took away from the World Cup in Qatar, it was, a lot of people had their apprehensions about going there for the reasons that you mentioned, Karim. And there was a lot of investigative journalism about it. I thought there were some really fair things that were done as well. I know the Guardian Football Weekly did a really, really good series on that laid out some of the cons and a lot of the pros as well. And one of the takeaways was, that no matter what, though, if you were a visitor there, you were kind of, as long as you didn't get rowdy, you were going to be okay. Fast forward to next summer. I know it's probably early to make the prediction here, but, John mentioned it here with the Little League team from Venezuela. I mean, what do you see out there on the horizon when we're going to host this mega event coming next summer where, as the saying goes, we're supposedly inviting the world to come into the United States to celebrate the sport?
It's unfortunately one of two things can happen. Either the event will somehow eclipse and overshadow the concerns that we're seeing, including very, very legitimate ones. You could have ICE raids taking place in the stadiums, but if the games are that good, for many people, that's going to overshadow what's actually taking place. And that's something the US will hope will happen, right? Because that's the power of sports sometimes, this romanticized notion, this vision of, oh my God, this great sports narrative is taking place. Say the US does this, I don't think this is going to happen because the US national team right now is not very good, but say they go on this incredible run. Incredible runs like that is what ends up overshadowing a lot of the negativity. I'll use Russia as an example from the 2018 World Cup. So Russia went on this incredible run at the time. And mind you, remember, Russia hosted that World Cup despite the fact that it had already annexed Crimea. People say, well, there wasn't a war in Ukraine. Yes, there was. It was a proxy war taking place in eastern Ukraine, absolutely active at the time, and Crimea had been annexed, yet the world had no issue hosting the event in Russia. It was a massive boost to Putin's reputation at the time. But here's what he really utilized. At the time, Russia was on an incredible run. I can't remember what they did. They made it to the quarterfinals or something like that. But it was a phenomenal run that nobody expected and really had the whole country energized watching the games. Putin went ahead and actually raised the minimum age for retirement passed it through Parliament without anybody noticing at the time. By the time people had actually rallied to protest, it was done and it was over. It had already been amended in Parliament and there was nothing you could do about it. So he utilized this incredible moment of joy for the Russian people, something that's very rare for them as is, and found a way to make that political and to gain an advantage from it. So expect the same to happen in the United States. Expect Trump, who understands the power of sports and of entertainment, to utilize this to his advantage, to present himself, and not just himself, but his MAGA movement and his political ideology as superior, as a winning strategy for America.
And you talked a little bit about that, not to just because you reminded me, I don't want to forget it. But Karim, I think one of the things that you wrote about Donald Trump, a person and a politician now, is that the WWE or the WWF, it might have been at the time when he was first getting involved with it, but that a lot of his, well, I'll just read the quote. It helped shape his political persona. Could you explain a little bit of that about what you mean when you say that the WWE helped shape Donald Trump's political persona?
I think so. Yeah, it's interesting because I might say his favorite sport is golf. The sport that is most beneficial to him politically now is MMA and the UFC. But it really is the WWE that is an excellent avenue and lens for us to understand Donald Trump as a politician, or just as a personality, really. He utilizes the heel persona in wrestling very, very well. That's pretty much his livelihood, and the heel persona is sort of the bad guy. And it's a wink, wink, nudge, nudge sort of thing about being a bad guy. But beyond that, he lives in an interesting style of kayfabe, which is, the term kayfabe sort of refers to wrestling reality. The idea that this image that we're presenting, this is our reality, and we're trying to maintain this image. Kayfabe is also the process of sort of sticking to this reality. Like, okay, we're bad guys, we are going to only eat out after the matches together. We can't be seen with any of the good guys, or else fans won't believe that this thing's real. So sort of living your gimmick was what kayfabe is, and that's Donald Trump to a T. That's his not just his personality. That's how he's run the Republican Party. That's how he's running the presidency and the White House right now. It's my reality, and I'm going to push that reality, and you're just going to have to accept it. And in many cases, his followers really did accept it, and I could say they followed him blindly up until we got to Jeffrey Epstein. Things have changed a little bit now. He's sort of, the walls of kayfabe are cracking around him, and he's unable to sort of plaster them back together the way he used to, right? And that's fascinating to me. But wrestling really is sort of this area that Trump understands very well and sort of lives by this code of kayfabe. And sometimes he's fooled by the world of kayfabe himself, by the way. There was a famous episode of Monday Night Raw, the WWE's flagship show back in the day, where Vince McMahon actually, who was the former CEO of the organization before being kicked out over sex trafficking and horrific sex abuse charges. He was actually blown up in a limousine in one of those episodes. And I mean, I think I might have been 13 years old or something at the time, and even I knew this isn't real at this point. But Donald Trump apparently calls the WWE the next day asking about Vince McMahon. Is he okay? Did something happen to him? Because he actually believed what was happening. This isn't a random rumor or retelling. Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Paul Levesque, whatever his name is, who is a big fan of Donald Trump now, and the WWE leadership is very close to Donald Trump, is the person who retold this story. So this it's shocking, I know, but yes, Donald Trump himself actually sometimes falls for and believes what's actually taking place in a WWE ring.
I love that. I have to make sure I get this question in. And it's silly, and I know it's a distraction, but it's also one of those things where it's like Trump has an opinion, and therefore that's the only thing that matters in the whole world, or at least that's what he wants. Donald Trump has demanded that the Cleveland Guardians and that the Washington Commanders go back to their previous racist names and logos and everything that disparaged Native Americans, And I don't know where this is going. My best guess is that this is like one of these things where he attacks a media outlet and and as a bribe, they have to like pay him off to make him go away. But I don't know if that's possible, if that makes sense. I don't think the Guardians or the Commanders under their current ownership are going to go along with his suggestions. And unless he just turns away and walks away from this and pretends it never happened, that's a recipe for like a fight between the president of the United States and either a National Football League team or a Major League Baseball team. Where do you think this is headed?
Well, before I answer the question about where it's headed, I'd like to say that I think that this is happening primarily as a form of distraction. It's no coincidence that Trump raised all these issues as he's trying to escape sort of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. So he goes back to rely on what has always worked for him, sort of the shock jock approach to sort of shocking people and getting them talking about him. Or what I really noticed was very, very prevalent in his first term in office was utilizing the culture war to his advantage. And sports has always been sort of this great platform for the culture war. The NFL, especially, you think of his first term in office, what was the big topic then? It was kneeling, right? It was Colin Kaepernick. That was a huge issue. And at the time, plenty of Trump supporters, plenty of MAGA people said that they're going to boycott the NFL, that they're not going to watch football anymore. Plenty of people went on Fox News. I mean, Candace Owen at one point said, screw the NFL, let's make the UFC the national sport. So Trump was placing the UFC as sort of this alternative for conservatives to the NFL at the time, and using the culture war as a means to sort of promote his vision for America. And I think we're doing something pretty similar here, but I don't think it's as effective. This idea that, hey, forget this Epstein stuff. Let's get back to this issue that I know a lot of my supporters care about, which is I want to be able to say whatever racist term I want at any time without any consequences whatsoever. So he's reestablishing that discussion. Can we be racist about this topic or not, and bring it into the sports element again? And that's just a form of distraction. He wants people online talking about it. He wants his supporters to be reminded why they love him so much. It's because he encourages and enables them to be the worst version of themselves unapologetically. This is just yet another example of that. As to where this is going, so difficult to predict with Donald Trump, especially in this term. This could be something that he forgets about tomorrow or something that he takes very seriously. The truth is, I don't think the name is going to change, and I don't think it's a good enough distraction for everything else he's facing.
Yeah. Speaking about saying what you want to say whenever without repercussion, rest in peace to Hulk Hogan recently, who went through that. We've taken up a lot of your time, and I do want to end on one note, because I know we could double our time here just talking about Saudi Arabia. But you mentioned it, and I had it jotted down on the things that I would like to touch on if possible. The Public Investment Fund. I think for a lot of people here in the States, Karim, this is sort of the Saudi Arabian influence on sports is this boogeyman that doesn't really exist in their world, because the U.S. is mostly about the NFL and Major League Baseball, right? And NBA still in the mix as well. And Saudi Arabia has been involved in golf with LIV and Formula One and tennis, and these aren't necessarily sports that everybody is drawn to each and every weekend. We do know it was an incredible sponsor of the Club World Cup. It'll be a sponsor of the World Cup in 2026. You're going to see a lot of advertising for Saudi Arabia. Visit Saudi Arabia during the World Cup. We saw it during the Club World Cup. But they are investing outside of Saudi Arabia. Newcastle, an English Premier League club. How long do you think it is before we see Saudi investment knocking on the door of some of what's considered the more traditional sports in the United States?
Oh my goodness, you've asked an excellent question, a nuanced one, and I'm wondering how I can succinctly answer this question. There's a lot to cover here. First of all, just quickly to talk about the major sports leagues in the United States. I think the pathway was recently opened when certain leagues agreed to allowing minority shares from foreign governments I think it was last year that this occurred, maybe the year before at this point. I'm sorry, so much sports and politics stuff is happening. I'm even getting my dates mixed up at this point. So the pathway is there, and I believe Qatar has already started that by buying a share in the Washington Wizards, for example, right? So it's very possible we will be seeing more of that type of investment, not at a major scale the way you can suddenly buy a British cultural asset like Newcastle United. What's happening in the UK is very different because they clearly are desperate for that kind of economic boost and investment because they've sold off significant cultural assets and economic powerhouses to foreign powers, including shares and significant percentages of London Heathrow Airport, for instance, right? Harrods, that famous luxury goods store. So it goes beyond just Newcastle United for them. As for Saudi's, investments in the United States, I think we've already seen tremendous investment outside of sports. When you think of Saudi's efforts in venture capitalism, first of all, I need people to understand one thing about Saudi. When you think of sports in Saudi Arabia, you might think that this is unprecedented. But what Saudi actually spends on sports is far less than what they spend on almost anything else. If you look at sort of the pie chart that the Public Investment Fund loves to share, that specifies just how much they're spending on various sectors and industries, you'll see that they spend a lot more on mega projects, on venture capital funds, on technological advancements, on healthcare, on all sorts of things like that. Sports is actually coupled with entertainment and makes up a very small percentage of the pie. But they get so much, an outsized amount of attention for those investments that they find them to be extremely worthwhile. But Saudi's already deeply invested in the United States through venture capital funds, right? Through Uber, through all sorts of other things. It's deep in the economy. They are incredible lobbyists in the United States as well. They've been lobbying hard. It will come as no surprise to you that outside of 9/11, which was the peak of Saudi lobbying in the US to ensure that their hopes weren't crushed forever of sort of integrating into the US, it was after the dismemberment of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, actually, that Saudi Arabia doubled its lobbying efforts again. So those are the two major spikes that you can think of. And they worked to Saudi Arabia's advantage because they are fully invested in the US economy on a wide range of fronts. So it comes as no surprise now when Saudi Arabia decides to get into, football or soccer, in the United States, it's so easily able to go up to CONCACAF, the regulatory body in North American soccer, and sort of just invest in them and say, hey, we are here to help you guys. We're actually looking to improve grassroots sports in the United States. So we're going to invest in this, and we just want these sponsorship agreements from you. Now, CONCACAF is basically represented more by Saudi Arabia than by any North American organization. When I was at the Canada versus Honduras game for the World Cup just last month, I actually noticed that 4 of the 6 sponsorships that were available, that you could see in front of you, whether on the pitch or on the screens above you, were from Saudi Arabia. One of them was for Riyadh Air, which is an airline that has never taken off the ground yet. It doesn't. They haven't started flying yet, and that's one of the main sponsors for the Gold Cup. It's just ridiculous when you really think about it, but it's unavoidable. Visit Saudi Arabia is everywhere now. But fans seem to have gotten used to it, right? You look at an Arsenal shirt, you see visit Qatar, visit this. It's become a visit something everywhere, right? You go to watch a UFC event, it's visit Abu Dhabi. It's visit Saudi Arabia. It's never ending at this point.
Right. Arsenal, I think, still has visit Rwanda, right? On their sleeve, and they've gotten a lot of heat for that as well. So you're right. Wasn't Pam Bondi, by the way, a lobbyist for Saudi Arabian companies? I think she was.
Ahead of the World Cup. Ahead of the World Cup in Qatar, yes.
Interesting how that works. Yeah, I mean, is there any, I know I got to go, but is there any positive impact in Saudi Arabia? Because like I said, I think for a lot of people, including me, uneducated as it might have been a couple of years ago, thinking about Saudi Arabia exclusively in terms of Jamal Khashoggi, you're like, oh no, like that's a bad thing. That's automatically a bad thing. But you hear a little bit about, as much as we talk about, human rights and how tough it's been on people in Saudi Arabia, that maybe things are getting a little bit better, but I don't know that. Is there a positive influence to opening yourself up to the Western world? Not that they have to have perfect alignment with Western values. That is an arrogant thing, I think, for people in the United States to constantly harp on, that everybody needs to have the values that we have here because, ours are kind of dodgy. But that being said, it does seem like whether, it's a small thing, like women being allowed to drive, like does it feel like there is real change starting to happen as a result of this exposure that Saudi Arabia has to the rest of the world and vice versa?
As always, these questions will depend on who you ask and the context behind it, right? And what their position is in Saudi's hierarchy. If you ask the general population, people who don't have any involvement in politics, etc., young people, let's start with young people. You ask young Saudis, young millennials and Gen Z, they love them. They love Mohammed bin Salman. They love what the country has become because this is what they've always wanted. This is what they see on TV. They couldn't understand the country that they were living in themselves, right? Some older people, you ask them and they're very apprehensive. The Saudi that they've long known is gone, and they're very worried for what the future looks like, what happens to their traditions, their values, their food, all of that stuff that they've known of Saudi Arabia, right? You ask women, and let me give you the words spoken to me by Saudi women. I was actually in Paris just a few months ago and sitting at a cafe, and 3 women were sitting next to me at a different table, and they picked up me and my cousin speaking in Arabic, and they're like, "Hey, where are you guys from?" And I could tell they were Saudis, and we eventually got into a conversation. These 3 very progressive women dressed, you would never guess, basically, based on traditional understandings of Saudi Arabia, that these were Saudi women. They were talking to me about how much they love Mohammed bin Salman and how the new changes in the government have made them proud of Saudi Arabia and that they can now travel and do whatever they feel like and they're very comfortable. But these were also women who were clearly of the upper class in Saudi Arabia. So, like I said, it depends who you ask. You ask human rights activists in Saudi Arabia and they are terrified of what's to come, not only because they have been touched personally by this, they have personal experiences with this, whether they've had family members snatched or disappeared, but because they are warning that Saudi is transforming into a police state, which is something it never was. Sure, there was religious totalitarianism before, but you could never have the secret police break down your door and drag you away in the middle of the night. That could not happen back in the day. Now, that can happen in Saudi Arabia. That is something, as an Egyptian, I can understand, because it's been happening in Egypt for long before even my parents were born. So we now understand that the authoritarianism that we have lived under elsewhere in the Arab world has now sort of crept into Saudi Arabia, no matter the facade they're presenting. Sure, if you stay out of trouble and if you never ever attempt to speak out against bin Salman or break this new social contract he's established with his people, you are likely never to feel the issues that are existing in Saudi Arabia. But understand that when you are in a place that does not offer you any personal freedoms, eventually somebody can come for you as well. And that's a scenario that you live in right now. There have been massive improvements in Saudi Arabia, but at the same time, with those improvements come newfound risks, such as this rising police state, this increase in executions, this real cruelty when it comes to passing down sentences for people who are barely even can be considered dissidents, have posted one thing on Twitter. It's all very troublesome. So we'll have to see what happens. Can they achieve their goals for Saudi 2030? What does the country look like by 2034? And when you have all these young people now being exposed to the world around them, isn't it possible that they will one day turn back to you and say, we want more rights than what you've given us? Are you setting up a change far beyond your control, basically? A Frankenstein, maybe, for Saudi Arabia. Who knows? There's lots of stuff that, if somebody told you they had a firm answer about this, Darren, I tell you not to trust them, because there's no way I think you can project that far into the future and understand what Saudi's going to become.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation, and we thank you very much for the time. Many thanks, Karim. We encourage everybody. I came across your Substack, I don't know how long ago, and I've really enjoyed subscribing to it. It's the type of content that you're just not going to get anywhere else, frankly, at least not that I've experienced. So thank you very much for taking the time to do this, for joining us. I think I speak for John. We really enjoyed it. Many thanks to you. Yep. Good luck, and I hope we get a chance to do this again somewhere down the road.
Oh, I'd love to do that. Thank you so much for having me on, guys. It was an absolute pleasure.
Will be interesting to see what sort of feedback we get on the Discord channel, on the politics tab on the Discord channel. But again, it's this intersection of sports and politics that you can't quite get away from. And I'm not exaggerating when I said I had a boss that's like, no politics. It's not what we're about as a company. And here you have the complete opposite of that. And it looks to me like there's a lot of subscribers on this Substack. So good for Kareem. And man, I enjoyed that conversation. I thought it really hit a lot of points, and hopefully people had some good takeaways. Hopefully you feel like I do, that you're just smarter after listening to it, and you feel a little bit smarter if you're a subscriber to the Substack.
I felt a lot smarter by the end of that. I also had this like sinking feeling about 30 minutes into it, right before he mentioned the Epstein files and how all this is just like a distraction. I was like, is this what Trump wants? Does he want us talking about all of the, spots where politics combines with sports to create, a distracting controversy so that we stop talking about the big thing that he's trying to make everyone stop talking about? Maybe, but I still felt like I got a lot smarter, and I understand the creeping in of politics into our sports better than I did before.
Yeah, and I think that the stuff about Saudi Arabia is so interesting because, I know I was one that was on radio a lot going, how could this happen? This is awful. This is terrible. And maybe it is. But it's hard to argue that they are not making incredible inroads in the sports. I was at the barbershop recently, John, and I couldn't believe that there was a kid in there, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years old, wearing an Al Hilal soccer jersey. Like, where did he get this soccer jersey from? And it was Neymar or Cristiano. It was one of those two. And I was like, whoa, like that's a real thing. And it's easy to say, well, tennis, right? Like, okay, so the Saudi influence over tennis or UFC or Formula One, maybe these aren't sports. People are here for baseball, I would think, for the most part. So, maybe it's easy to say, in golf, I'm not really a big golf fan, but I'll watch the majors, and I don't know, I see all the golfers that I know playing in the majors, so has it really been that disruptive? But, when Saudi comes knocking on the door and all of a sudden, Saudi Arabia is the owner of the Padres, after John Seiler gets fed up with this nonsense of being dragged on social media, I wonder, like that will be a real game-changing moment.
Darren, if you're curious where you can get an Al Halal jersey, where that kid in the barbershop may have picked his up, you can get them right now online at Dick's Sporting Goods, Fanatics.com, or Lids.com. So apparently this has also infected the e-commerce world of jerseys and sports memorabilia in America.
I can run right down to my local Dick's Sporting Goods store and I can find an Al Halal jersey.
At least it's on their website. Probably. It says free delivery, though.
Can I find an SDFC jersey while I'm there?
That's a question that is not for me, Darren.
Yeah, just I mean, it's there. It's just there. And like I said a million times, I feel like we kind of lost the war on that. I don't even know that was a fight, but anyhow. So there was a lot there. Like I said, I'm curious to hear your feedback. Do you guys want us to do more of that, or you just want us to talk about trade scenarios?
I mean, this week it's probably trade scenarios. They'll probably be like, you could have held off on that until next week, but there's nothing going on. There's nothing happening. So I'm glad that we had Kareem for as long as we did to talk about all those interesting intersections of sports and politics.
Mm-hmm. Speaking Snapdragon Stadium last night, it was a 3-2 final. You mentioned watching some of this and you had some thoughts?
Yeah, as always, I'm going to add a pinch of salt in here and be like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Actually, the article that you posted this morning on Blue Sky or Twitter or both did a very, very good job of explaining how SDFC tries to play and why their back line is so young and the ways in which they try and build from the back and then fire through the middle to create an advantage for Chucky and Dreyer. I felt like that really made me understand what they were doing more. But I watched last night's game, and after the first 15 minutes, I was like, wow, this is high pace. This is fast. This is entertaining. This is incredible. And then after that, it felt like Pachuca was just a little bit faster than SDFC. And I felt like that had more to do with the fact that maybe Liga MX is a little bit faster than MLS style of play. but the SDFC guys, they kind of wanted to get the ball, survey the situation, and make a decision. And they got the ball, and while they were surveying, all of a sudden they had someone running right at them, and they were like, oh, crap, I got to do something. And it's not to say they played poorly. I thought they played good. I was just going into it, and then I saw an article that said Pachuca, I think, was like top of their table in Liga MX. And I was like, that makes sense. They looked like a really good football team. And SDFC, you know, they tried their best, but I don't think they were the better team last night.
I think that's fair. You know, but one of those goals goes in the first 15, 20 minutes where I thought SDFC was really taking it to Pachuca. And maybe we're talking about something different.
That was the one off the guy's face.
Yeah, that was the one that Pachuca ended up scoring. You know, Tommy Angel had a shot in the first minute of the game. That was a really, really good look. And it was, you know, I don't want to say it was the most difficult save for the Pachuca keeper, but he had a good look. We had a shot in the first minute. Yepe had a header in the 13th, 14th minute.
I thought that was going in.
Probably got to get that one on target. You know, Chucky had a shot, you know, with more accuracy, like that goes in and you have a 1-0 lead against Pachuca and goals change games. So maybe it becomes a different game. And then they score in the 23rd minute on that ridiculous goal where there's this great save from Pablo and it bounces off the guy's face.
Actually, so two of the goals that Pachuca scored were essentially quote unquote off rebounds, right?
Yeah.
One is Pablo blocks the goal, it comes back, hits the guy in the face, and then bounces into the goal. He scores. And another one, Pablo had a great save. And I think this might just be a thing that this very young backline has to work on. But Pablo makes that save, and you look at the backline defenders, and they all have their back to Pablo, trying to prevent more guys coming up and helping, not realizing that the ball's just kind of sitting there. And so I think as they get older, they'll realize, like, once that shot gets off, you have to be prepared to go get that rebound to prevent, because we've seen this now like 3 or 4 times where Pablo makes a save and the rebound is the one that goes in the net. And so it's fine. They played fine. They just played a really good team.
Yeah, they played a good team. They also played a team, by the way, that like a month ago, speaking of the Club World Cup, was playing against Real Madrid in the Club World Cup. You know, no offense to SDFC, but, you know, they weren't going to get intimidated in the first 15, 20 minutes of this match when they just played against Real Madrid in the Club World Cup a couple of weeks back. They didn't beat them, but, you know, they at least have been on the field with some of the best clubs in the world. So from that standpoint, you know, they still held their own. And some of the, you know, good to see the assist, I thought, from Harangi, who looked really, really good. I love the assist. I know they're chasing the game late, and Pachuca's just shithousing the hell out of the match. There was so much shithousery going on there.
That's how Anders got his red card, right?
I know. That's a bummer. He's going to be out on Friday night. That stinks. But he gets an assist, and Boateng gets a goal, and you know, Luca Bombino, whose name has been out there. Maybe he jacked up the price a little bit for him on a transfer, so we'll see. I don't know. But that third goal from Pachuca was absolute class. But yeah, like the first goal was weird for them. Then the second one, to your point, Pilcher probably got to close that one down a little bit more. After Pablo makes the save, probably can't give that player that much space in that area. But I don't know. I know it's not about moral victories. We were debating in the press box, you know, how seriously is SDFC going to take this? And I think it was sort of a play it by ear. You know, if you have a little bit of success and all of a sudden you feel good, then, you know, winning a couple of times during the group stage, getting to the knockout, you know, I think it's 4 Liga MX clubs go through and 4 MLS clubs go through. You know, you're probably behind it at this point, especially with no Anders on Friday night. Yeah. Against Tigres, and the Liga MX clubs did pretty well on opening night. What did I see? They won 5, lost 1, a couple of those on PK, so it becomes a little bit of a math equation at this point. But is the tournament over for them? Yeah, it's not over, but you know, you probably got to get a result out of that first one with Tigres and Mazatlan coming into town. But we were debating, like, how seriously are they going to take it? It's like, well, I guess we'll find out. Like, maybe if you score a little bit and you find yourself with a lead, you take it more seriously. You're like, hey, like, we have a real chance here. This is an opportunity for us to go ahead and win something. Yeah. And, you know, I don't know that it's all going to change. I don't think that's how they're wired, but, you know, it was entertaining. I mean, that was I think objectively a pretty, you know, it's not entertaining when you're down 3-0. Full disclosure, I laughed. But, you know, they were entertaining goals at the end of it. And, you know, I guess there's there's something to be said for your first experience in League Cup being one that ended with you attacking, even a man down, and Pachuca hanging on and just sort of hanging on for the first ever experience at Snapdragon Stadium. So anyhow, bit of fun.
I turned it off after Anders got the red card because I was like, well, that's it, right? Red card, you're down 2. And it wasn't until this morning that I looked, I was like, 3-2. Wasn't it 3-1? And I had to go back and find the Luca Bombino goal, which was brilliant. I mean, it's a great header. If Yepes' header had been like that, then maybe it'd be a closer game.
Ifs.
So yeah.
Ifs. We're back to the ifs.
I know. I just,
But you're right. I said the same thing. I mean, if they get one of those early on in this game in the first 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah. And the Chucky one, I mean, you were there, so I don't know how much you saw the replays. The Chucky one was particularly gutting because they had a shot from straight behind him that was close up, and you see the ball heading towards the goal, but he puts spin on it. So it's heading towards the goal, and then it just spins out of the goal. And it's like, oh, man, he was so close to, and that was the narrative going into it, was Chucky against his boyhood team, right?
Yep.
I think it was 3-0 when they pulled him, which made me feel even worse that they started scoring goals afterwards. But yeah, it's just, it is a game of luck sometimes.
Maybe a bit of skill. I think the luck was definitely on
skill.
their goal, but you're paying Chucky to make that.
Yeah.
We're saying a lot of nice things that sound like silver linings and moral victories, but you are paying Chucky to make that shot. And, he didn't make it. So it's not all on him, but as I said, I think there were 2 or 3 opportunities early on, really good opportunities where you could have done enough that, it becomes a little bit of a different match, but the results are the results. So
last thing, just because I keep doing the Manu Dua hype train. This was the first time I saw him, and he looked a little scared.
He, not great positionally. Yeah.
I mean, I thought he still tried hard, and he still obviously has the skills, but there's been so much focus on look how confident he is with the ball already. And this game was not that. Every time he got the ball, it was a little how do I get rid of this? So again, it was a different speed.
All right. So here's the deal. I'm getting out of here. Like out of the US for a couple of days. So I'm not sure exactly what the role is going to be over the next few, but I'm going to go swim in some tequila for a few days in Cancun. Mentioned on the Discord channel, I cannot believe the cost of the cross-border express. That round trip for 2 people is now up to $96.
Didn't it used to be $30 a person?
Something like that. I swear we were talking about it last night. I think I remember it being like $10 to $13 per person. Now it's up to 96. So we're just going to cross and take a taxi.
There you go.
But I'm not going to be completely. I will be completely off the grid on Friday. Mm-hmm. Friday and Saturday. I don't even know that I'm going to pick up a telephone. Probably just put it in a safe and just get away from it all. Obviously tomorrow with the trade deadline. My wife won this incentive trip. I know professionally it's probably not the best day to be missing, but I will keep an eye out for what it is that's happening. We have a red-eye flight out of Tijuana tonight into Cancun, so I'll be generally aware of the trade deadline and able to contribute in some capacity for tomorrow. But John will do a lot of the heavy lifting, which I think is certainly something that we've all come to expect from Front Row Seat. And what he does here for the podcast every single day. So I do want to say in advance, I do appreciate it, but I could use a couple of days just to get away from it all. But trade deadline stuff, we will have reaction. We will definitely, if something happens today, I think we'll circle back. Yep. We're going to leave ourselves the opportunity to do something in some capacity. So, that will be something for subscribers, obviously. And I mean it. I would really like to know what people thought of today's podcast because, this isn't, somebody was asking me last night in the press box, how's it going? How's it going? It's good. It's good. It's got a lot of room for improvement. Yeah. Said I worry sometimes that we're sounding a little bit too much like sports talk radio.
Agreed.
And, I want to start doing some different things. I was like, yeah, not this episode tomorrow might be, it might be one of those. So, if you enjoy it, then great. And if you thought it was awful and you never want to hear it again, well, I guess we'll process that. But
yep.
Again, I think smart, nuanced conversations should be welcome. even if there are things that maybe people don't necessarily agree with. So we'll be back again. The show rolls on for the next couple of days, but I'll be just in limited capacity for the next few. So thank you everybody for the support. Appreciate it. As always, tell a friend. We do appreciate that. Word of mouth is probably great. John and I are TikTok superstars now. So, if you like what you're seeing on social media, tell a friend about us and say, hey, listen, for as low as $5 a month, I'm not going to tell you how much it is to subscribe to Karim's Substack, but
it's more than $5 a month.
It's more than $5 a month.
Yeah.
So.
And he's not doing a daily podcast.
Yeah. And that's, now his level of expertise is different than our expertise, but, we don't get to say that we're investigative journalists.
Not yet, Darren. Not yet.
Yeah. I was just trying to survive a tsunami last night.
There was a point last night when I turned to my wife and I said, I hope Darren's going to be okay.
And if not, John, all of this would be yours.
She was like, how close is he to the beach? I was like, hey, you can see it from his house. Like it's pretty close. And she was like, does he have a place to go? I'm like, he's got 3 stories and a roof deck. He'll be fine. Like there's nothing, unless it's going to knock your house over. You would have been fine.
When we bought the house, the details, it said, what is the flood risk? And we're a 1 out of 10, which I thought was dubious, given that we're about 150 yards away from the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
But I think it has something to do with the slope of the street that we live on, that the water, I guess, would go rushing past. I don't know. I don't know how they calculate this, but I was like, 1 out of 10, huh? I kind of looked, said, yeah, the ocean isn't that far away. Like, what's going on here? But I didn't question it because, you just got to get in. Stephen Woods is in Hawaii.
I know. I saw that last night. I actually forgot about that until he started posting like, yeah, we've moved to higher ground, et cetera, et cetera.
He said, I texted, I was like, you okay? He said, we got evacuated and there's sirens that are blaring all night. Now, I will appreciate that the Weather Channel just showed you the most serene shots of the Hawaiian Islands with the sun setting. And it was mesmerizing. It was really mesmerizing as much as you were terrified that this 30-foot wave of water was just going to come crushing everybody on the island. But it never happened. But for the meanwhile, I was like, oh, this is beautiful.
I did watch some live streams that were just like waves crashing on a Honolulu beach. And I was like, oh, this looks lovely. I should go back.
And I did what I always do. When I really need help, when I'm really deciding if there's sincere concern, I call Jack Cronin from News Radio 600 Cocoa. And he's like, yeah, the waves are going to be 1 to 2 feet where you are. Probably nothing too much to worry about, but just don't go near it. Don't go out in a small watercraft, I think is what Jack said. Which is so Jack Cronin. So
safest place to be, on the water in a boat.
We all made it. All right, John, have a good one. Again, we'll be back if there's anything to report here for the rest of the day. Enjoy the Padre game, and we'll do it again tomorrow.